Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of Dialed In. Today, we are here with the wonderful, the one and only Kolby Goodman, who is here to talk to us about interview best practices and how do you really stand out as a candidate and get chosen as that one right fit. I know I've set the bar pretty high already, Kolby. I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself with our viewers.
Jane, hey, Joe, thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it. I have been a career nerd from early on. My later years in university were spent during the previous recession, and I realized that it was my job not to get a degree, but to go and get a job. And so with that,
Mm.
dug really deep into resumes and interviewing and talking to professionals and getting outside my comfort zone about how to be not just a student, but a professional. Fast forward another 10 years after getting it's an experience as an IT operations professional and then manager, realized that I wanted to go and do this full time. And it's been the last 10 plus years where I've helped over 4,000 individuals go out there and find better work that fulfills them more, that they get paid more in doing, that gives them that right energy and that right excitement through articulating and communicating not only their passions and their values, but their impacts so that they can make the most out of their careers.
I love that. I feel
Pretty
like you
good
said,
stuff.
yeah, said all the magic words there. Love it.
Yeah. So when we're talking about, being like self-proclaimed career nerd,
Mhm.
and love that that's kind of the verbiage, we'll be including that for sure. Um, Curious what it looks like for you in helping everybody individually find what's special about themselves.
I see myself as a truth seeker and not in terms of I think when people hear that, right? I'm going to tell you the truth. It's like, "Oh no, like what did I do wrong?" But I think we do that enough to ourselves anyways, and we have this kind of
Mhm.
defeated self image, a lot of us. I think it's for a couple of reasons. I'll dive into that here in a bit. But it's my job to be a passionate but disconnected partner with my clients in this very important and vulnerable process of finding meaningful work and say, ultimately, why aren't you giving yourself enough credit? Why are you continually putting yourself down, thinking you're not good enough? What evidence do you have to show that? And what I tend to discover is that that evidence is completely made up in their own heads. There is nothing externally that tells them that they shouldn't own their strengths and their skills. They should not be humble about how they can help and how they can impact others. And these individuals just need somebody who is not them and who is not somebody who is close to them, right? Because I'm sure if your partner or your parents or your best friend said, "Oh, you're amazing. Why are you doubting yourself?" It's like, well, they're saying those things because they're supposed to, right? They love me. But for me, it's about let's dive in. Let's explore first why you have those doubts. And then let me show you through your own words and your own experience why you shouldn't be contradicting yourself, especially as you take ownership about building a career that you really love.
I think that really resonates with both HL and I, as part of this career coach team here, because we are all coaches on the call today. We often, will say to people as we're getting them ready for interviews or resumes, it's hard to remember and talk about the good things about yourself. We place more emphasis and energy on the bad, and that's what's come to mind first. And that's part of the reason why people struggle so much with putting a resume together and talking about their accomplishments and, being prepared to speak to all of their triumphs in prior roles, etc. You know, I'm curious, Kolby, what do you do in those moments with your clients? Like, what is something that can be helpful? Maybe if someone doesn't have the opportunity to talk to you one-on-one, what are a couple of takeaways for folks that can help them get over that limiting belief?
Yeah. So the number one thing I get that my clients struggle with is Kolby, I'm just not good at selling myself. I get that, right? We don't like being sold to. So why would we like selling? Especially when we're asked to sell the thing that we have the most doubt about, which is the person in the mirror. And so the way that I help my clients flip that on its head is don't make it about you. Nobody wants to be sold to. We all want to know what's in it for me. And so if you can empathize and connect with that hiring manager wholly and understand, appreciate what they're looking for, what they like, and most importantly, what their pain and suffering is, and how they hope the next person in that role can be their, savior, to be a bit hyperbolic. That's how you stop making it about you and making it about them, right? Because kind of like what we talked about here is, making sure that you bring the highest return on investment. You are the highest ROI candidate in the stack. And the best way to do that is to bring impact and value. And the cherry on top for you as a candidate is to make sure that the decision maker feels good, has the warm and fuzzies about bringing you in so that you can help them.
Love that. I love that, and I agree. Like, and I think that nobody, even when we're in the realm of like SDRs, like we are, like
Mm-hmm.
in kind of like helping support folks break into the sales industry, it people don't want to feel like there's a falsehood or like you're being sold on an interview when it comes to like the interviewer. And yet, like the age-old question of tell me about yourself becomes the hardest question to answer. So, keeping in that sentiment of like, don't sell yourself, but find a way to still feel confident in articulating a strong answer to that question because it's always going to be asked. What would your top recommendations be?
I think the big issue people go into interviews with is they feel like they have to impress. I have to impress you with my experience. And so they start off wrongly, in my opinion, with that by answering the tell me about yourself question with this life story. And I'll admit it's not the most well-told story, which means it's not the most listened to story, which means it doesn't really add to the value of the conversation. And so I would challenge you listeners to shift away from the what of you, what did you do, where were you, into the why of you. So the next time your listeners hear the phrase tell me about yourself, I want them to hear, tell me why you're here. What about your experience, professional or life? What about your passions? What about your curiosities got you to want to be in this conversation and be a part of our team? Because that why is so much more resonant, so much more emotionally sticky in our brains that we're going to remember that. There's an old, saying by Theodore Roosevelt: "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." And the best way to show that you care about the role is to say why this is for me, why I align with this as a human, not just as a professional. And I think that then sets precedent for the rest of the conversation. We're going to go deep fast. And I hope, and Mr. and Mrs. Manager, I hope you're okay with that because this is who I am. But with that, you connect with that person on a human level. Because if they don't know you and don't like you, they're not going to hire you.
I love that. Connecting on a human level is so important, and bringing that level of authenticity to these
Mm-hmm.
conversations is also really important. If you're putting on that falsehood, the person on the other end is going to see right through that. I want to take a step back for a second. When you first introduced yourself, you talked about not only helping people kind of with their interview prep and impressing in the room, etc., standing out from the crowd, but doing meaningful work and finding something that really speaks to their soul. Maybe share a little bit more about what that looks like for someone who comes to work with you.
We have been taught to think of work, as the doing of something on a regular 40-hour per week basis. And I think that can be really daunting, especially for young professionals that you guys are helping, right? I'm not even 25 years old. How do I think about the next 30, 35 years of my career until I get to retire? And that is a legitimately dizzying thought. And I would also argue too that if us tenured folks here on the call on the show today know that if our job titles for everything we did all day, we would all be professional meeting attendees and email responders. And so the
Wow.
doing of the work,
Yes.
or Slack messengers, I guess, as well. The doing of the work is not nearly as important or as prevalent as what problems are you solving while you do your work. And this is the mindset shift that is priority number one when anybody comes to work with me is let's stop talking about what you want to do and let's understand what are the problems that you want to solve. This is important for a few reasons. One is you don't get caught up in the minutia of work. Because even the most boring meeting or the most useless email has at least a little bit of meaning if you know that it contributes to the problems you want to solve. It also helps you create momentum to a more meaningful career, which ultimately is more interesting challenges. Because if you're simply just doing a job, you're going to be a cog in a machine longer than you want to admit, and you're going to become bored and disconnected. But if you are a problem solver and you're good at solving those problems, you're going to get asked to tackle more interesting and more challenging issues that help you grow and help you bring more value. And then lastly, because good companies you want to work for long term and respect your time and your expertise and have good cultures, are not looking for people to do jobs or to take orders. They're looking for creative problem solvers to move the needle forward. And so by shifting your outlook in your career and in your job search from job doer to problem solver, you align yourself with somewhere that you actually want to go versus feel like you have to show up to every day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really, all those pieces I think are really important when it comes to like that mindset shift. And we speak to growth mindset a lot here at SV. And I am curious, like the that mindset and some of like the softer skills that we've talked about in kind of articulating in the interview process and even kind of starting to like self-reflect and develop in our
Mhm.
own understanding of ourselves are so important. And the hard skills are also equally important when it comes to an interview of actually being able to articulate like, no, this is what I know, this is when I've, you know, used my hard skills before, these are the trainings I've got. And so, how do you balance working with your clients in getting that the nuances correct, but also, you know, making sure that they also can kind of hard and fast know the job description, know how to answer questions around the job description, and convey a confidence that like they are a person that can get it done.
I think it's about leveraging curiosity in the conversation. I mentioned before that I think people look at the interview as trying to impress, almost like a performance. And I think that's where a lot of the rigidness and the nerves and the pressure comes in the interview is like, I have to tell them what they want to hear, when they want to hear it, and sound like I know 1,000% what I'm talking about. I feel like that sets everybody up for failure in the fact that you're not yourself. You're lacking that authenticity because you're putting everything you're talking about through a filter that isn't you. And you're not allowing the manager to really understand who you are and what you bring to the table. And so I think a big way to shift this so that you can sound more confident, so that you can articulate yourself more effectively, and so you can actually resonate with the human across the Zoom or the table from you is don't be afraid to get clarity. A lot of times questions are asked of you in interviews with little or no context, right? Tell me about a time where you turned a no into a yes. I'm sure that's a pretty fairly common question for your reps out there, right? And I get what the interviewer is trying to ask, right? But as an advanced interviewee, as a candidate of a high return on investment, and somebody not looking to simply do a job but to solve a problem, your job is to think one layer deeper from the question. Don't answer the question itself before you understand why it's being asked in the first place. So for the question I just gave as an example, tell me when you turn a no into a yes, what you can say, well, you respond to the question, I've done that tons of times. I worked in retail. I've convinced, my mom to stay out, help me to stay out past curfew all these times. But so I can give you a more pointed response. Can you give me some examples of some of the common objections that your reps face on a daily basis? Or what's the biggest pieces of feedback that you're getting from your leads about why they are or are not closing, right? Get more context because as you get more context, you don't have to worry about being perfect. You don't have to worry about being lucky and selecting the right story to respond with that hopefully actually resonates with the human being you're talking to. So I would argue, and I think your audience is more adept at this, is treating the interview as a traditional sales conversation. If you are unclear about what the prospect is saying, you are in your absolute right to get clarity and to make it a conversation, asking questions, pinging back and forth, then letting it devolve into an unintentional interrogation.
I really appreciate you bringing that point forward. You have to treat the interview like a prospecting call, right? Like, here's where you need to showcase your sales skills right up front. And whether or not you recognize it, there probably are some like hidden Easter eggs or hidden challenges in that conversation, and they want to see how you manage them. I also love that you touched on understand the why. Why are people asking you these interview questions versus, well, they were on the list of 10 most common, so they're going to ask me. When you actually go through, hey, here's what you did well in an interview, here's why you're not getting the job, they didn't see the answer they were looking for. We so often hear of, oh, I didn't realize why they were asking me that question in particular. So love that you touched on that. Understand the context of what they're actually looking for here. You mentioned before, the idea of nerves and it's a nervous situation, etc. Beyond preparation, sometimes, we just get into our heads and in the moment, that performance anxiety, etc. What tips and tricks have you shared with folks in the past that can help them in the moment to alleviate and just be able to take that deep breath?
I think living in silence, being okay, being more comfortable with silence. I think a lot of times in interviews, we try to fill the space, and that's where our nerves get the best of us. I'm sure we've all experienced it. I know I have, where my mouth outpaces my brain and garbage falls out, which isn't helpful, which then makes me feel like I have to recover from that. So just take your time, be comfortable. Like I have learned in public speaking, in giving workshops, and doing awesome shows like this one, I need to slow down a little bit. Right. I get excited. As I said, I'm a self-proclaimed career nerd. So you guys are talking my language and you're giving me this pulpit to preach to your choir. And so I get excited and I get really impressed and I get nervous. And then I just like lose the train of thought. So A, slow down. B is remembering that the person you're talking to, they want to fall in love with you as a candidate. Remember, you're a problem solver, which means they have a problem. And most likely, they need that problem solved yesterday. And so they are looking for the right person to walk in the door or log into the Zoom, and they want to feel a sense of relief and thank the maker that they found you. So remember that they want to like you. They want to love you. They're not there to derail you. They're not there to throw you off course. They're not there to sabotage. And I would say, parenthetically, if that's what you're honestly feeling, that's a good sign to get the hell out of Dodge, right? But it should feel like this meeting of the minds. I would also say, lastly, here too, and that is helpful when you feel small in an interview, especially in panels, right, where you have 6 to 16 eyeballs on you and you feel really small. It's a remembering that the statuses in the room can change when everybody wants something out of everybody else. So instead of being big bad boss and lowly candidate, and you are kind of wanting what they have, almost the little brother big brother syndrome, right? Keeping the ball just out of reach. It is your roles are now, instead of boss and candidate, it is problem haver and problem solver. And you guys are peers. And you're looking for ways to say, is this a good fit? And that leads me to my last point, making sure that you are looking for a good fit. You talk about authenticity, talk about self-awareness. I've dealt with so many people who have gotten themselves into a lot of career trouble, mainly being in companies and under bosses that they would never work for in a million years, but they found themselves there because they're not fully present and conscious in the interview because they're solely in that performative, impressive mode. And as much as there's Easter eggs in the interview to help you succeed, there are things you should be looking for as a candidate to make sure, yes, I can do this job, but is this where I want to do it and who I really want to do it for?
I appreciate that. So many good nuggets. And I do think there's something to be said for like it's a chemistry test too. Like it is something where both sides are trying to see like, can I work with you? Like, is this something where can we solve problems together? And sometimes you are going to approach situations differently, but that might be what they're looking for too. They might be looking for somebody who's going to approach it and has a different thought process, different approach to things than what they already have and what they're already doing. And I especially really appreciate you saying like they actually want to like you. They don't want to have to keep spending, hours of their day looking and interviewing people. They want you to be that special person. And I think that sometimes that can really help like a candidate get kind of outside themselves or get out of their own way because they feel like it's similar to when they're making calls as a salesperson that like they need to just like luck out by somebody saying yes to them. But instead, it's like, you're calling people, you're talking to people that want you to solve their problem. So give yourself some credit and get on in there. You talked a lot about like what to do, which I think is fantastic. I'm curious if you have any like rapid fire, what do you not do in an interview? Just to kind of give people like a rundown of don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. Because sometimes we might find ourselves making mistakes or doing things maybe we shouldn't do that we don't
Sure.
even realize are preventative to that end goal.
The big thing you shouldn't do is assume that you shouldn't try to tell the interviewer what you think they want to hear. A lot of people go in and say, and I think I see this a lot more in people who are doing a lot of preparation and research into the role and using ChatGPT and Claude and all these other awesome resources to do preparation. They lose themselves in how they want to present themselves in a conversation. So, kind of going back to in the moment stuff, I would, and you said, aside from prepping, I think ultimately there's a place where you can over prepare for an interview because at that point I would say you're over prepping because you think you are lacking something, because you think you need to know one more fact or memorize one more story. But I think it's where a lot of people get lost in this process is they think it's simply just about more and ignore making sure they look at quality and depth. And so if you find yourself stressing yourself out by how much you're preparing, that's a sign that you should take a break and say, how could I do this smarter? How could if this interview was going to be easy, what would it look like? And how could I be prepared for it? Because I think a lot of times, especially as we try to prove ourselves, and I think especially as we kind of go in, we try to establish ourselves in a professional sense, we tend to think more is better. More money, more hard work, more closes. That tends to really stress a lot of us out. And so think about less. If you're finding yourself struggling in your process, think about how you can do less but better instead of ending up doing more but worse.
I love the idea of that, finding that Goldilocks balance, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you have to do some prep, you have to do some research. But yes, once you tend to get more into your head and then overanalyze, overthink if you do too much. So yeah, that really resonates a lot. Um, you've given us a lot of really great tips, but also wanted to give you the opportunity. You have a book. Would love to have you share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So your video viewers will see I'm holding up my book. It's called Employed by Graduation. Start now and 49 other things you can do to be employed by graduation. Even if you already are graduated, I think this is a really valuable resource. Basically, I wrote it for 22-year-old Kolby, who graduated from university and impressively floundered, who was rotting away on his couch while his girlfriend and his friends and everybody else he knew was either still in school or was out there getting a job. And I needed something to get me thinking and more importantly, get me acting before I found myself rotting away on the couch. And so this book is designed to pick up, flip to any page, do that one action today, and know that you are making progress towards the ultimate goal of finding a job. What I found in that struggle and what I have found with my clients who are in similar struggles is they try to eat the elephant whole. Never works. It causes overwhelm, stress, anxiety, and ultimately it causes a lack of action. And so this is designed to break it down and to kind of eliminate decision fatigue a little bit and say, okay, today you're going to do this and only this. And as long as you do this, you should feel good about yourself about making progress. And so it's available right now on Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.uk.co. Right now, it's the Kindle version. The ebook version is just $5. And think of it as a manual. If you're out there and you're struggling and you don't know where to start, pick this book up, flip to any page, and just do that thing. And you're going to build a heck of a lot more momentum than doubting yourself, getting into the rabbit hole of watching another YouTube video or reading another article on this stuff. It's designed to take you from overthinking to action as quickly as possible.
Very cool. I love it. We will definitely include a link to the book in both the video and the audio description. So if you're watching this, just check out the description for the link to follow and see how you can get the book. That's so cool. I think it's such a, you've already shared so many nuggets and I can just imagine what's in the book. So definitely a valuable resource. Final question for you is what is your favorite breakfast?
Oh, I don't know if you guys have that there in the Great White North, but my go-to is a breakfast Crunch Wrap Supreme from Taco Bell.
Oh, we do have Taco Bell up here in Canada.
Okay.
Spoiler alert for anyone listening, we're Canadian. Um, but that sounds delicious.
Mhm.
It cures what's ailing no matter what's ailing you. You can hold it with one hand. It's savory, it's crunchy, it's soft. It's the best thing in the world.
You are
Okay,
making us
I'm
hungry.
hungry.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
it's breakfast time.
I love it. Breakfast for dinner is the best.
Yeah.
Um, also spoiler alert, it's nighttime. Okay, that's awesome. Jane, what's your favorite breakfast food?
Oh gosh, everything. I think I'm an eggs person. I eat eggs most days. I love to have a good protein-filled breakfast. What about you, HL?
I love eggs Benedict, my favorite.
Mm.
So good. Can never go wrong. By the year from now, all of our listeners are gonna know all of our eating habits. We just talk about food. Amazing. Thank you, Colby, so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure to listen to you, and I learned a lot, and I think that it was a great reminder of how we can kind of find our own value and also be able to kind of articulate and leverage it in a intentional way, which is definitely what you haven't um hit home that it that matters. And I think that's really great for everyone to hear as well.
Yeah, we would
Well,
love to have you back if you're open.
absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me on. Appreciate listeners making it all the way to the end here. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's just Kolby Goodman, Kolby, last name Goodman. Happy to connect. Let me know you heard me here on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Thank
Well,
you.
thanks everyone.